This is the Resonant Identity, a podcast about personal growth, identity, and transformation. And I'm your host, Terence Waters. If this show resonates with you, I invite you to share it with those you care about and resonate with. I also invite you to follow the show anywhere you find your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I ask that you also consider leaving a review and feedback so we can improve future episodes for you. And a quick note before we begin, AI did help me generate this episode, and we personally verified and reviewed every part of it. At Fluxline, we believe in responsible, transparent AI usage, and we take full accountability for everything that we publish. To learn more at fluxline.com, fluxline.pro/legal. And the Resonant Identity is an educational and reflective framework, not a clinical service. If you're navigating significant emotional distress or mental health concerns, please seek support from a qualified mental professional. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is basically now about resonance and dissonance, which is understanding how we align with the right things that expand our identity coherence, ensure that we are currently aligned with our true and chosen identity, while also recognizing distortion and misalignment that dissonance poses to us. So up to this point, we've really been talking about identity alignment, identity coherence, body setup, the subconscious, how the body and the mind work together to help us make decisions, and the vast unknown of our mind, which records everything that has transcribed in our lives. And really, at this point, we have touched a little bit on resonance and dissonance, kind of in relation to truth and distortion, but we haven't really taken a deep dive on it yet. So you might be asking yourself, really, why are we actually going through resonance now when we could have actually just explained about it earlier in the podcast? Because if you think about it, again, this is the Resonant Identity. That's the whole name of the podcast, right? Why exactly would we now introduce it like 4 or 5 episodes later? Because the reason is we wouldn't have been able to actually give you a full understanding of what resonance and dissonance is, because without that, all of this knowledge that we've given you, we wouldn't have been able to fully bring it home, being able to show you how the entire process works as you try to understand alignment, identity alignment, making decisions, and so on. Because we needed to give you information about the background of why we make the decisions that we do, how we have these tendencies to try to make these decisions, where they come from, and how sometimes we really just make decisions that just don't align, sometimes without any fault of our own, just because of our misunderstanding of who we are. So the reason we're going over it now is because you have now enough knowledge to being able to back this up. And now we can go through and understand what resonance and dissonance are, so that way we can look into how to recognize it, understand what it is, and how it aligns with what we're trying to do as we transform into our future identity. So before we start, I just want to talk to you about a small story here. Because my resonant moment and dissonant moment really happened as I was trying to become a podcaster. So I'm going to go a little bit more into the personal side of things today. So I was in a current job that I was making really good money, 6 figures. I was doing pretty well at what it is that I was doing, and found out that I really could have excelled where I was. I could have gone up the corporate ladder. I could have gone into anywhere in the company I wanted to. There was unlimited opportunity for me to grow. And I could have done this upon years and decades of options and retired. I was making 6 figures. I had great benefits. I was doing everything I was supposed to, and I was learning. But there was this little part inside me that just for whatever reason just felt off. And I can never really actually understand what it was until one day I started looking into the future of what was going to be happening with my career. And there was this big, huge knot in my stomach that just told me this is no longer what I want to do, which really surprised me because just 7 or 8 years before, I had set out on this really big journey to actually become a corporate manager. I wanted to go into the AVP status. I actually wanted to make some really high-end decision calls. And so I went and got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, started understanding all of these different skills, business alignment, how to work with the software development lifecycle, because I do engineering and design. And so what was really surprising to me is that I've done all of these things and learned so much, but this inside part of me was just telling me no, and I could never really understand why. And what happened there was it actually didn't become clear to me until after I lost the job, because what then happened was I then started to understand really what identity alignment means. Because at a core, what I then realized is that I'm not meant to be part of the cognitive wheel of the corporate lifestyle. And the reason for that is because it was taking away a very specific part of me that I didn't even know actually was part of my identity. And that's being a knowledge worker, being a research assistant, a scholar, a visionary, and an entrepreneur, a person who likes to create just because I can. It wasn't something that I actually understood because the noise that was happening from my job was taking my ability away to fully understand my true and chosen identity, even though I didn't even know what it was. And so this is a prime example of what resonance and dissonance is, because resonance is an idea of a full alignment of something you want to do. And dissonance is a misalignment in any one of those different areas. In my example, that dissonance actually started as a somatic signal, this churning in my stomach. My chest started tightening every time that I had to look at my Teams just to sign into a damn meeting. I cannot tell you, by the way, the first day looking over and realizing I didn't have to sign in, that was awesome. It was great just to be able to finally be able to take back my freedom, but then start to understand who I truly am. And that's where the resonance core identity came into the resonance core framework came into play, my PhD work, and now this podcast, because I'm realizing I want to give back to the world and I actually want to talk with people and inspire them to become the best version of themselves. None of that would have happened had I not listened to what my body was telling me, the body being the actual compass of our decisions. Because what happens here with the information that we now know about our somatic signals, emotionals, cues, and also our narratives is that all of this starts in the body and it brings itself up to the mind without us even really realizing what is happening. Because the body and the mind are already subconsciously making those decisions for us, whether or not we're aware of them. The only time that we become aware of everything is after the body and the mind have done its job, where we're getting those thoughts, those emotions, and so forth. So for me, my body already knew that something was off because of that churning, but I wasn't consciously aware of it until I actually pulled myself out of the situation and started listening to it. That's what resonance and dissonance are. And so now I can define specifically what resonance and dissonance are. And we're going to start with the resonance piece. This is very, very important for you to understand, especially as a steward of the resonance core framework, because this sits at the forefront of all of your decision making. So definitely pay attention. So resonance is an alignment, a full alignment of your somatic, emotional, and narrative signals in line with who you are and what you stand for and who you are becoming. So really what that means instead is resonance is a full sense of grounded clarity, expansion, rightness, excitement, joy. That actual feeling that we get not just simply on the emotional side or thinking, yes, we are aligned. It literally comes from the body all the way into our actual decision making, a full alignment from body to mind and emotions. And you feel it naturally. It's something that just simply comes through because when you get those little, what I call jellies, they're those actual feelings of expansiveness, excitement, that euphoria that even comes about when you start making decisions and seeing something that's going to expand you. You see it as a way of actually being forthright, of being creative, of being engaged, finding ways that those decisions that you happen to encounter expand you and really push you to being that person. And so it shows up in yourself as things like ease, curiosity, spaciousness, a sense of internal, yes, this is exactly what I want to do, because you feel it in your bones. You don't just simply feel the emotion. You don't just simply think that you're aligned in your head. It's everything. All of your data points, somatic, emotional, and narrative, align into the same decision that you're about to make. And this actually has some scientific research attached to it as well, which we've already been talking about some of it, but we're going to just reiterate some of that here just so you're aware. Because the first thing that's happening as the first gate, which is your body, is actually doing an interoception process. When you encounter something that asks you to make a decision, your body is already looking into that situation with you not even realizing what it's doing. And it's taking interoception and activating your body because it actually experiences that resonance first. And then what it does, it then brings it into a polyvagal state, which then brings you in the emotions that match it, which in this case, because we're talking about resonance, we're talking about light cues. So those things that feel expansive, joy, excitement, rapture, those areas that enact our emotions so that we want to engage with something. And then what happens is, because the subconscious responds to that, it then looks into what it thinks you are in terms of your identity and pulls up those memories and ideas to your brain so that your brain can then establish those same narratives and stories that align with what it knows you to be. So if it actually aligns with your true and chosen identity, which it can, it's not just simply a source of distortion, your brain, your body, and your emotions, all three have fully aligned in the decision that you're about to make. And at that point, you start to feel it all. You start thinking those expansive thoughts. You start getting engaged. Your heart rate starts coming up a little bit. You can feel it because that excitement is grounded within you, not just simply those emotions. And this comes down to what we call the identity coherence theory, which basically states if you are making decisions in line with your identity, these resonant decisions, which are fully aligned from the body all the way up, transform you and tells your body and subconscious who you are and who you're wanting to become. And it's our job, whenever we experience that resonance, to always make those decisions appropriately when we know that we are aligned in what it is we're doing. And that's why identity is so very important to understand, because in order for us to be able to understand and make those decisions aligned with it, we need to know who we are. We need to know what we're choosing to be, and we need to know what we stand for in terms of our values and our virtue system. Because what that does, it then signals to the body and the mind that information that we do believe, because we need that in order to be able to make those decisions to transform into who we want to become. And the final thing before we go to break is I just want to reiterate that in order to be able to transform, we can't just simply think our way out of it or think our way through it. We can't just simply feel or manifest what it is that we want to do. Those are definitely important. And yes, we do want those mindsets to ensure that we're making those right decisions. But the fact of the matter is, we need to action on those things. Resonance is the key to help us with actioning, because when we feel that we need to engage in some way, maybe we need to talk to a colleague, maybe we need to look inward in order to be able to align something, maybe we need to journal, maybe we're coming up with a new project, whatever the case may be. Resonance is the full signal that shows your entire system that you are aligned in that decision you're about to make. And because we want to transform, identity transformation is not passive. What I mean by that is that we can't transform unless we actually action on it. If we want to become someone, we have to change a little bit who we are. And the only way to do that is to learn by making decisions aligned with who we are and who we want to become. And resonance is the way that we do that. You're listening to the Resonant Identity with me, your host, Terence Waters. We'll be back in a moment. This is the Resonant Identity with your host, Terence Waters. Welcome back. So now that we've talked about resonance, we now need to understand and talk about its counterpart, which is dissonance. And it's pretty much exactly what you might think based on what it is we've already talked about, which dissonance is a misalignment, is something in your body, your mind, or your emotions that just signals that something is off. And it usually shows itself in some way that produces some sort of tension, some friction, some fragmentation in the decision we're about to make. And it can happen in any one of the three areas that we discussed: somatic, emotional, or narrative. Because again, remember, this all happens in the body as the first gate. And then because of the signals that occur, our emotions then match that. And our brain then develops a story or narrative to explain our somatic and emotional signals. And so when we look at this in terms of dissonance, that misalignment can occur in any one or all of those areas, which our body just naturally happens to make those decisions based on its past experience. So how it shows up in our body, first off, we'll talk about somatic, which is you may experience chest tightening. You may experience shorting of breath, a little bit of tunnel vision. You're starting to experience a little bit of stress, like a fight or flight response. In emotions, it can also show up as like tension, fear, guilt, anger, offensiveness, things that usually show as shadow cues, or sometimes even indifference if you're not really experiencing something that enlightens you. And then you also will experience sometimes this as part of the brain, where the narrative loops start occurring. And we're pretty familiar with these, but we'll just make sure that you're aware of them, where your brain starts to then give you stories about what you're experiencing, like I am a failure, or I need to avoid this because this is going to cause some issues. This is a risky decision. I can't really make this decision because, and so on. But all of them have something in common. You will always feel in your gut and in your body that something is off. And they usually are accompanied by these types of cues: somatic, emotional, and narrative. But there's also something that I do need to make you aware of, because dissonance does not necessarily mean 100% that you should not make a decision. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because sometimes decisions that we need to make to transform also require us to transform ourselves and our inner workings. Because remember from our past experiences and past episodes that the body keeps the score because that's the one that recognizes our threat response. Our emotions then match that. And our brain then tries to make sense of that from the vast unknown of our subconscious mind, which is that monk writing in the monastery, all of those things that we have talked about, our negativity, our positivity, and it's just simply writing down what it understands. And from there, that's where it pulls that dissonance or those distortions, which in that case, you then start to see that your brain is incorporating all of those random thoughts. But what you may not realize is that the decision you're about to make may be aligned with your chosen identity and your true identity. And sometimes, and actually many times, there will be a mismatch to where your past identity, which is where the cues and narratives come from, may not match who you're trying to become or who you are. This is the tricky part about dissonance, is that it's not 100% foolproof. Yes, we will experience it, and many times it does give us valuable information, but it's very important that we understand that dissonance is not necessarily danger or a deterrent. All that we look at it as is information, because this is what our body, our mind, and our emotions have decided to align with, but it also makes us wonder, why are we aligning in a different way? So now what we need to do is explain the 3 layers of resonance and dissonance, which we already explained a little bit more, but I want to go in a little bit deeper just so that you understand this process, because we do need to recognize when we are resonant in a decision and when we are dissonant in a decision, so that way we can use both to help us make correct decisions in line with who we are and what we're wanting to become as part of our window of choice. So the layers that we're going to be talking about are the ones we already just mentioned, which are the somatic layer, the emotional layer, and the narrative layer. So let's review those just real quick. So remember that the body is the first gate of human experience, where it's recognizing a stimulus and trying to find the best way to respond to it. And it does so through either resonance or dissonance, based on what it has experienced in prior situations. So in resonance, of course, we have an open chest, steady breath. We feel calm. We feel collected. We also feel opening. We actually are grounded, present in the moment. And we do not feel any threat. We simply experience ourselves in homeostasis in most cases. Dissonance, however, does show in signals like a tightened jaw, having trouble breathing, shallow breath, bracing, what may experience as collapse, tiredness, things like that. Experiences that really show us that something is off in the body. And because, again, that gets pushed to the brain and its emotional processing center takes that and matches emotions according to the resonance or dissonance. Calm, confidence, curiosity, and warmth in resonance, or anxiety, irritation, indifference, anger, whatever may experience in dissonance. And then, of course, the narrative, which takes it and says, this just doesn't make sense for who I'm becoming. This just doesn't fit me. This is definitely exactly what I want to make this decision about, and here's why. And it should be obvious at that point. Narratives that push us for expansiveness are the ones that we want to hold on to as resonance. Narratives that deter us, that make us feel judged about ourselves or others, that contract us, are dissonance. And the difference between those two lie in our narrative and emotional and somatic cues. All of those areas which act as data points. Because, as we mentioned, dissonance does not always necessarily mean that you should not take an action on something, but also the opposite is true. You may feel resonant about a decision, but it also may potentially be set up in distortion, which is another tricky part, because the flip side is also true. You may feel 100% aligned in a resonant decision, but you may not be 100% aware of actual truth. And if your body and mind are aligned in distorted views of reality that you might think actually aligns with you, you could be making decisions that actually involve identity erosion. So let's say that you decide you want to align with something that is a falsified fact, something that you've been told that you resonate with because it makes sense to you, but you're unaware that it actually is distorted reality, that it is false. If you align with that, you will feel resonant about it. And that's the tricky part here, is that you may experience that past and current reality and the information that aligns with the two. And you may also even conclude that this actually aligns with who you are. But if it's shrouded in distortion in any way, this will erode your identity because you are making decisions that are not based in true fact or truth. And so we need to use a tool called interpretive hygiene to not only recognize resonance and dissonance for what they are, but we also need to understand data points in telling us, why are we resonating with this system? Why are we resonating or experiencing dissonance with this situation? What are the actual facts? What is the data telling us? What are these other people trying to give me information about? And we use that through what's called the triad, the logos, pathos, and ethos of the discernment process of helping us understand fact from distortion. Because if something makes sense in terms of the triad, we know that it makes logical sense and is based in fact. We know that it resonates with us and makes us feel warmth. And it also embodies us and emboldens us to make those decisions because it is aligned with our reality. And if you happen to align with something that's based in distortion, any one of those three sides of the triad will throw an error. You may experience and notice that, no, this actually is not a true fact. You may experience that it's true, but it goes against your actual personal self and your value system, or so on. Interpretive hygiene is the actual process by which we look into all of our data points and understand specifically what they are, and being able to ascertain what everything means. Because we don't want to make decisions incorrectly based off of distortion. And even if we experience resonance, we also treat that the same way, just to verify that the resonance actually is based in truth and is part of our reality. And the exact opposite, like I mentioned, is true as well. We may experience misalignment in our past and current and future realities in terms of who we are and who we are choosing to be, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that the dissonance is 100% wrong or that we should avoid it. We use that same process of interpretive hygiene to being able to look at it and say, why am I experiencing this dissonance? Because then you can look at it and say, oh, these are actually just echoes of a past me, but this decision actually is aligned with who I am and who I am becoming and is rooted in truth. And so even though I'm experiencing this dissonance, I'm actually rewriting my script and showing myself that this is aligned with who I am, because I'm telling myself this is an alignment of who I am. You're listening to the Resonant Identity with me, your host, Terence Waters, and we'll be right back. This is the Resonant Identity with your host, Terence Waters. Welcome back. So now what we need to do is talking about how do we specifically go through and validate our resonance or dissonance in terms of data, in terms of validity, and truth or distortion. We did go over it a little bit before the break, but I now want to give you the very specific step-by-step instructions on how to do this. And we call this what's called the resonance test, which is a real-time practice that occurs when you experience either resonance or dissonance as you go about your daily life. It's comprised of 6 steps right before you actually make a decision. And when you decide to make the decision, you will then know that you actually are rooted in truth or that you are experiencing distortion and why, so that you can make your arrangements and judgments and changes to make sure that you are resonant and truthful in the decision you make. So first off, we recognize this as what's called a causal reality, which then happens to move into what's called the volition stage. This is a psychological process where, like we explained before, the body and the mind make up its decision about what it is that you're going to decide for, but then you then take the information and decide what you want to do with it. So the causal process is your body and your mind. We can't control that. Your body and your mind are going to do whatever they're going to do based on its understanding of your past reality and your past experiences of life. But as soon as we become then available and understanding that we are experiencing resonance or dissonance or a cue, that's where we then take control under what's called the window of choice. We're going to go over choice and agency in the next episode. But just for now, just be aware that the window of choice starts when we experience resonance or dissonance in our bodies and in our mind. And at that point, that's when we're able to control it and decide what we want to do with the information and make a decision or not. The window of choice, that's basically what it is. But there's a lot more to it because choice and action are what drive your identity's transformation. So it deserves its own episode. But just for now, just know that that's where we make decisions based on what we're understanding of our current reality. Before we go into the resonance test, there's just two things that you need to understand, which is reactivity and responsivity. Because in this case, reactivity is very easy to do because if we do not fully understand our resonance or dissonance or our cues, we may make decisions that may go against who we are. Because many times emotions don't have 100% of the picture, especially when they're shrouded in distortion. But responsivity, which is what the resonance test gives us, allows us to pause and hold the script a little bit so that we can fully understand what's happening first before we decide to do something about it. And the resonance test is how we work through responsivity in what's called the window of choice. So first off, here's what happens. Once the body and the mind have done its thing, it's decided to react to something, it's decided to enact some emotions, your narratives are now starting to come to you. At that moment, you're going to notice your cues and your narratives are now coming into your conscious reality. You may experience thoughts in the moment. You may notice that it's harder for you to breathe or that you're experiencing tunnel vision. You may all of a sudden notice that you're getting emotional, that you're experiencing fear, you're experiencing confusion, indifference. You may also experience the opposite of it, which is a calm, collected nature and also excitement, joy, expansiveness under resonance. When you notice that in the conscious mind, you're experiencing either one of those two things, resonance or dissonance, this starts the resonance test. And once you experience that and are cognizant of it, you go through these 6 specific steps to help you ensure that you are valid in what it is you're understanding. So the first part is very simple. Ground yourself. Pause the script. Hit pause on that tape player, on that CD player. Oh, wait. Or on Spotify, because, for you younger people, you may not know what those are. But what you're doing is you're pausing the actual track. Yes, you're experiencing resonance and you're excited and things are wonderful, but you're also wondering, okay, wait a minute, I need to understand what's going on here. Or you're experiencing just that something's off feeling and you're really trying to understand why that is. You're allowed to pause what's happening before you do anything. This is what this process does. And you need to ground yourself by using meditative techniques, breathing, those processes to ensure that you are grounded and understanding and clear. And then the second one is what's called scanning the body. So once you paused and you feel like you can notice what is happening around you and within you, you then scan the body and understand what it is doing. In resonance, of course, it sounds like you're experiencing calmness, collectiveness. You're able to breathe normally. Maybe you're really excited, so maybe you're breathing quickly. But you also may experience chest tightening, gut wrenching, things like that signal dissonance. And then from there, you then name the emotions of what is currently happening in you based on resonance or dissonance as well. And you label them according to the 3 different measures of how we label our emotions. We're not judging them. We're not stopping them. We're just simply labeling them so that we can understand all the emotions that are occurring with us. So if we experience things like fear, shame, and those happen to contract with us, we label those as what's called a shadow cue. A shadow cue aligns with dissonance because a shadow cue, like a somatic cue or an emotional cue, tends to make us not want to engage in something. We may shy away. We may get angered. We may decide to be offended or feel something or what's happening here. We may decide, you know what, I need to avoid this because for my own safety. Those are shadow cues, the cues that aren't necessarily bad because we don't use terms like good or bad in black and white thinking. We instead label it as just simply a cue. This is the meaning that we think is happening behind it. If you experience emotions, but you're not really getting like a charge from it, you just happen to be indifferent or meh, those are considered indifferent cues. So that could be confusion a little bit. That could be indifference. That could just be ennui, different areas, right? Those cues we still label as indifferent because they still give us information that we're going to use here later in the resonance test. But we're also going to do the same thing with light cues. And light cues are those cues that align with resonance. So expansiveness, joy, excitement, those areas that make us want to engage with something. So when you notice all of those emotions, you write them all down. And your somatic cues, write them all down. And when you're ready, you then look into them and label them either as light, indifferent, or shadow, based on how they make you feel and how you see the world. And then, of course, your brain is also trying to make sense of all of this. So you're also going to be matching it with thoughts, which means you now need to check and write down the narrative, whether that's a resonant or dissonant narrative or multiples, because that's where you're then going to be able to understand, based on all of the cues and the narratives you wrote, whether you're experiencing resonance or dissonance. Because if you're experiencing resonance, you should see many light cues and you should be thinking uplifting thoughts. But if you're experiencing dissonance in any way, even if it's in just one area, you're going to see a lot of indifferent or shadow cues in either somatic, emotional, or narrative. And then from there, that gives you a full data analysis of what is happening inside of you based on the situation you're experiencing, so that you can then ask yourself questions. And the biggest one that really resonates and shows the most, and it's the one I use the most, does this feel like me? And when we say like me, does this feel like who I am? Does this feel like an alignment with my true identity? Is this something that I could align with in my chosen identity? Does this feel like me? And you can take those cues and say no and yes. And if you happen to see a combination of yeses and nos, you'll then know you're experiencing distortion in some way, which then requires us to look into the source of them, specifically around usually your narratives, because your narratives are the thing that tell you what your brain thinks is going on. And if you're experiencing dissonance, that's usually where the source of the distortion occurs, because that's the one that's most easily understood. The emotions and the body will always respond appropriately, but it usually is responding to past experiences. So it's not the body or the emotions that are incorrect, it's the brain in how it actually is interpreting those cues. And the brain is the part of ourselves that we can specifically control, so that we can rewrite the script of our subconscious mind and the vast unknown data center in alignment with who we are and who we are becoming. And to do that, that's where we use our skills of interpretive hygiene, asking fact-finding questions, understanding ourselves more, separating the dominant narrative from the hidden narrative, which is the actual truth of where it's pushed through, and then rewriting our narratives in actual truth. But if we experience resonance and we still feel that they're aligned with our true and chosen identity, that's also a very good cue and a good sign for us, because we then know we can make that decision recognizing that it is aligned with who we are and who we are becoming. This is the core skill of how you recognize resonance and dissonance, which is understanding all of your cues and narratives in the moment when you're experiencing a decision you need to make, inner turmoil, issues that may be occurring or whatever. This allows you to stop a little bit and slow down before you decide to make a decision. Now we're going to bridge it just a little bit to episode 8, which is going to be the window of choice, because we use resonance and dissonance to help us make decisions. Again, based on our current and true reality. Because resonance expands the window of choice, because it makes us feel good. It makes us resonate with something that we know will actually bring us joy and expansiveness, because it's aligned with who we are. And dissonance narrows it, but it doesn't necessarily mean we should deter from it, like I mentioned before. Instead, we need to just look at it and say, yes, this is narrowing what it is that I'm trying to do. I'm feeling some stress. I'm worried about it. But let me get more information before I actually make a decision. And the part between it is the awareness, which is remaining present, ensuring that our bodies respond to the correct things through interoception, and using embodied awareness and somatic discipline in the resonant core framework to ensure that we are making decisions aligned with who we are. Because resonance is not really magic. It's just simply our bodies and mind giving us a full alignment in what it is it thinks we need to do. And it's not just intuition, by the way. It involves the logic and the self-image of who it is we know ourselves to be, which expands that definition of intuition so it aligns with all three sides of the triad, the logos, the pathos, and the ethos. Because it's the integration of our entire system and allows us the ability to rewrite the script so that we can further align with who we are. And we can train that by using and making those decisions that action the proper way. You're listening to The Resonant Identity with me, your host, Terence Waters. We'll be right back. This is The Resonant Identity with your host, Terence Waters. Welcome back with me. So the last piece we're now going to go over is our 7-day challenge, which is feeling the signal. Because what we're going to do is we're now going to practice the resonant test in full spectrum as it occurs and slowing it down each day so that you can practice each step one at a time before you do it in full. Now, I need to just caution, as we always do, sometimes these experiences and feelings may seem overwhelming. And if it's not something that you can do safely, please work with a mental health professional to help you understand your actual emotions and your somatic cues and your thoughts. That your number one priority should always be your health and safety. And if this becomes too much, please ensure that you seek out medical professional help in order to be able to do this. It is a little bit difficult the first few times you do it because it is a new experience. But the more you practice these processes, the easier it becomes. And I guarantee you there will be a point where you'll be able to feel free from your actual cues because you then align it in your actual true identity of who you are and in true reality aligned with truth. So for the 7-day challenge, what we're going to do is we're going to break it apart each day, one day at a time. Small wins, little steps that help you understand how the process works, which then it culminates into the last day so that you can then practice it all at once at that time. So day one, as you're going about your day, I want you to just notice one moment of resonance. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter the situation. All I want you to do is when you notice that you're resonant in something, I want you to write it down. And I want you to explain why you felt it was resonant. What specifically made you choose that specific instance? In day two, I then want you to do the exact opposite, is I'm going to have you notice one moment of dissonance. Why did you feel that this is a moment where you just felt something was off? What was happening within you? We're not analyzing or doing the resonant test on day one or day two yet. All we're doing is we're just simply acknowledging I experienced dissonance today, and here's what happened. Because then in the remaining 5 days, we're then going to practice the actual art of the resonant test. When you then take that resonant experience you had, or if you have one that same day on day 3, I want you to map the body, scan it. When you experience resonance or when you experience dissonance, I want you to scan what specifically is happening in your body. Are you feeling gut wrenching? Are you noticing your chest tightening? Is your jaw clenching? Are you having trouble breathing? Are you having shortened breaths? Are you noticing that you just feel calm, collected? Maybe you don't have any cues at all. Whatever the case may be, just notice what is happening in your body with no judgment placed on it whatsoever. And once you've written them down, then apply the labeling system to them, which is the light, indifferent, or shadow, and depending on what meaning you're attaching to them. Because remember, these are just data points. We're just experiencing jaw tightening. We're experiencing issues with breathing. Those are not simply issues of good or bad. They're just simply data points, just something we're experiencing as a fact. And in day 4, I want you to do the exact same thing, but then with your emotions. again with a resonant or dissonant feeling. If you don't happen to experience either resonant or dissonant issues in that day, use the examples that you used from day 1 or day 2. You can still be able to take those if you think about them, where your body will then start to reproduce some of those actual emotions or signals. So even though you may not experience it in the moment, if you think about it hard enough, your body still will respond to it, which is a very interesting process, but that's how it works. And then I want you to check the narrative of your resonant or dissonant action. What is going through your mind? What is it telling you? What are the thoughts that are currently swirling in your mind trying to explain? Is it aligned with who I'm becoming? And then from there, I then want you just to evaluate the data of it. Evaluate it through interpretive hygiene. Does this actual narrative make sense? Is it actually making me feel expansive? Am I aligning with it emotionally? Or is it actually bringing me shadow emotions? And does this actually align with who I am? Is this alignment with who I am becoming? Or is this potentially aligning with a past echo of someone I no longer am? And then in days 6 or 7, I want you to run the resonance test directly through. You may experience it in the moment or even after the experience if you're not able to really go through it as it's happening. But I want you to then run through the entire resonant test from pause to somatic, emotional, and narrative understanding, and then checking it through the interpretive hygiene step. That is your 7-day challenge, which will help you explore and understand the difference between resonance and dissonance, so that when we get into the window of choice next episode, you'll then understand what we need to do and what needs to happen so that you can make decisions that are aligned with who you are. So keep this in mind and always use this test whenever you have that question, the gut-wrenching, the something feels off, or that you even feel excited. The resonant test is the item that will show you whether that is actually rooted in truth or in distortion, regardless if it's resonance or dissonance. So thanks again for listening here. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe, review, and like this on your favorite podcast service. It helps me out a lot just to ensure that we get the word out to people. And be sure to share this episode with those you care about and would resonate with. You can find the Resonant Identity on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, or X under the name The Resonant ID. Have fun, be safe, know who you are and what you stand for, and make choices aligned with your true and chosen identity. Stay safe out there. Goodbye for now.